Welcome to Fintech Impact. This podcast is an exploration of the financial technology world, interviewing different fintech entrepreneurs about what they do, their story, and what their impact is on consumers, incumbents, and the industry as a whole. Here's your host, award-winning financial planner, university lecturer, and writer, Jason Pereira.
Hello, and thanks for joining me yet again on Fintech Impact. I'm Jason Pereira. Today on the show, I have Othalia Doe-Bruce. Othalia is the public relations manager for OneLedger. OneLedger is a company that is focusing on creating interoperability between blockchains. Essentially, what they're doing is trying to create an API level so that blockchains can communicate with each other. So basically, you'll be able to do a smart contract in Ethereum and transact in Bitcoin and do things in whatever other blockchain you need to do to get them done. That is something that was actually never really built into the system from day one. So they're working on creating the communication between them. So with that, this is my interview with Othalia. Hello, Othalia.
Hello.
Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So, Othalia, last name pronounced Doe-Bruce. Sorry.
Yes, it's Doe like Jane Doe and Bruce like Brussels.
I should have had that. That's a lot easier than it sounds.
Exactly.
Okay, so Othalia, please tell us about OneLedger technology.
So basically, the OneLedger technology is trying to resolve the interoperability issue of blockchains, meaning that right now blockchains do not talk to each other. So if you are on a blockchain platform, you cannot transfer data from that platform to another. So let's say that you were using a smart contract on the Ethereum platform, which is really the platform of choice for smart contracts, but you wanted to leverage the popularity of a cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin, which is obviously more popular than Ethereum. You'll be able to use an Ethereum smart contract to transact on that contract. So basically, OneLedger allows you to basically transfer data around, regardless on the underlying protocol of that blockchain.
Okay, lots to dissect. We're going to come back to it. For those of you who are having trouble blockchain, there was the Fintech 101 episode. Please go back and listen to that, where I explain it hopefully well. So we'll see. So tell me about your personal journey and how you came to be with OneLedger.
So I've been working in the investment management industry for almost a decade. A little bit more than a decade. And I think a couple of years ago, I started reading a lot of articles about blockchains and specifically Bitcoin, because it was becoming more and more popular.
That's the big one.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the firm that I was working with, which is Manulife Asset Management, had started to build a tech team around this technology. So I thought, maybe I could get into this because it sounds quite interesting. And then I come across this course offered by York University on Ethereum development, Ethereum being one of the blockchain platforms. So I took it, and then I've just stuck to the industry ever since. And it's been a very exciting journey so far.
Excellent. Who are the founders? Can you tell me about them and what drove them to start the company?
So OneLedger actually was founded by David Cao. So David Cao is an architect, an engineer architect who came from China and then built his own consulting business and started working with a couple of Fortune 500 companies such as IBM, implementing their technology for them. And then he started learning about Hyperledger, which is another type of blockchain. Yep. And then seeing the issues that blockchain platforms were having, he decided to create OneLedger as a solution.
Good. So let's go back to this concept of the transfer of data between different blockchains. So we're not talking about necessarily the currency aspect here. We're literally looking at the smart contract aspect of blockchain, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So then, explain to the listeners what the benefit of the interoperability of these different blockchain networks would be.
So the benefit is being able to pick and choose the different features that different blockchain platforms might have. Because right now, if you are on a Bitcoin blockchain platform, and I don't know if listeners already know this, but there is Bitcoin, the currency, and Bitcoin, the actual technology underlying the currency. So if you're on that platform, it might be difficult for you to create a smart contract, for example, right? And then if you were on another platform, it will be actually impossible for you to use Bitcoin to operate that smart contract. So having a sort of bridge between those platforms allows you to get a synergy that is not out there right now. That's the reason why you need.
So, I mean, I could theoretically create a smart contract in Ethereum, and then I could, in turn, basically settle that contract using Bitcoin as a currency, just as a simple example. So, yeah, I mean, given that there are like thousands of cryptocurrencies out there now, and many of them are, basically very functional in terms of what they do in the back end for people, that I can definitely see the value of that. The question becomes, so do you have examples of current utilizations you can give us?
Interoperability.
Like an example of an actual use case that has existed thus far.
For just the interoperability part of things. Yeah. Not that it's existing, but could potentially exist.
It's still early stage. Exactly. So I want to understand, I want a real world example where you can basically tell people how this would benefit them. Yeah.
Sure. So let's say that, for example, a company like Manulife was operating its processes on a blockchain platform. Let's just say.
Fair enough.
And then
I can only hope in the future that'll happen.
Exactly. Yeah. And then they have this custodian called State Street. And then State Street is on another blockchain platform, because each blockchain platforms are on different systems. They're using different
nodes,
protocols.
Different protocols.
Exactly. Everything is different.
Architecture,
They wouldn't be able to transfer data between each other. So when came the month end, for example, these two entities are supposed to transfer data between each other, but because there isn't a bridge between them, because they are using these different blockchain platforms, they will actually have to do reconciliations of those data manually.
Which is the entire point that blockchain is trying to avoid.
Exactly. So basically, interoperability could solve that problem.
So that makes sense. I mean, we hear a lot about different companies talking about setting up their own private blockchains. I mean, Bitcoin and Ethereum are one thing. But, I've heard speculation of like basically entire stock exchanges running their own private blockchain. So the dealers basically each maintain their own record as well, but the entire stock exchange is essentially kind of distributed away from one location, right? And the ability to, say, reconcile the Canadian versus the US stock exchanges and have them, they may not be speaking the same language because of the needs or desires of that institution, and having them communicate each other. So essentially what you're doing, I'm borrowing this term from the graphic I'm looking at on your website, you're basically creating an API gateway layer for all blockchain.
Right.
That is okay. That is very cool and very. So again, for those of you who need to know what an API is, go back and listen to the Fintech 101 episode.
I actually check it out too.
Well, at this point, I haven't
interesting.
Recorded it. I'm recording it next week, and it's going to broadcast before this one goes out. So that's interesting. So in terms of the level of interest, how many conversations are you guys having with like large institutions at this point? Is this still kind of early and abstract to them? Are they recognizing this as a problem?
So definitely a lot of institutions recognize this as a problem. And another firm that is actually Canadian is called Nuco. And they are also developing their version of interoperability. And the product is called Aeon. But my point is, the industry knows that there is a strong need for this. And so a couple of firms have come together or on their own to solve the issue. Yeah, and so, for example, for One Ledger, we have already on our board, but as a partner, we have Polymath, which is another type of blockchain platform. And what Polymath is trying to do is facilitate the issuing of securitized tokens. So they see the value in One Ledger. So very early on, they've decided to partner with it. And so our advisor is the co-CEO of Polymath. We also have one of the biggest VCs in Asia. Forgetting the name right now, I'm having a blank. But yeah, one of those biggest VCs that are also very interested in partnering with us and actually have invested in the One Ledger technology. So yes, there is definitely a lot of interest from the traditional side, but as well as this new industry.
Interesting. Yeah. It's interesting because as you're talking, I'm sitting back thinking this almost seems like a gaping hole that should have been dealt with initially. But I mean, you think back to the original paper by Satoshi, and the reality is that this was never blockchain is first of all never even referenced in the paper.
Exactly.
And it was never really conceived of in terms of smart contracts. That was later on with Vitalik and Ethereum. And it's funny because it never crossed my mind that as we've been talking about, we can use this to like transfer ownership rights of property and then currency and all this other stuff. but we never built a communication layer for talking between them. So you guys are filling a need I didn't even know existed, but if I sat and thought about it for 5 minutes, I would have found it. And you think about, I think about the number of ways you guys can impact everyday life, and it kind of blows the mind, right? Like if we get to a point where I can, settle, a transaction for a home purchase, right, on a blockchain, which is a good use for it. But, I need to communicate, the money needs to transfer between a trust agent and eventually the owner. That could all technically be done on blockchain, but they wouldn't talk to each other unless you guys build this system. And it's kind of funny too. What I find difference about this, and maybe it's because of the way the systems are set up, everybody else, the way an API works is every individual company sets up their own API and then they all get to talk to each other. Yeah. You guys are kind of almost creating like the app store for API. Like literally everything clears through your system, not the individuals.
Right. Yeah.
Do you have any kind of, has the crypto community been concerned about that kind of almost power line within one or a handful of institutions to create that kind of link?
Well, I mean, the beauty of blockchain is that it's a decentralized platform, right? So one ledger will be a decentralized platform, and essentially it will belong to the token holders and the community. Fair enough. Will have
so it's another power. Blockchain technically.
Exactly. So it's the blockchain underneath other blockchains.
Fair enough. It's blockchain squared. Interesting. Okay, good. So, I mean, how do you guys I think about all the number of blockchains that are opening up and the number of currencies opening up, like honestly on a daily basis. There's websites where you can literally go in, change it, set a couple features, and ta-da, there's your code, right? Like that easily. Like how much of a concern is it for you guys to stay on top of that sort of thing? Like, do you have to create the links to all these things? Like, how's it working?
We can really control what happens outside of one ledger. And actually, we are definitely for the exploration of all of those use cases and how it could be applied and what type of technology could be used for it. And everybody comes in and brings in their own flavor. And that's great. Because, again, the industry is so young, we don't know what the future is going to be like.
So then, a lot of people are going to sit back and scratch their heads and say, okay, well, that's nice. It's going to be public. How do you guys as One Ledger monetize? Like, how do you make money and keep the doors open doing this?
So we are planning to monetize in the future because we are not monetizing right now.
Also, your pre-revenue, like so many startups, and I just did the air quotes because that's what everybody says, pre-revenue. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. But is there a vision for that, or are you just going to figure it out along the way?
No. So because our engineers will be building the platform, so they will know the platform best. And so we will, once the platform is ready, we will go out there and consult for companies looking to get onto the platform. So our system is based on a modularized sort of, architecture, if I can say that. Yeah. So a company, a bank looking to have a module for a specific operation will come to the One Ledger developers and say, okay, can you help me with that? And we will do it for them very easily. They wouldn't need to train their developers to do it because we will be ready to do that.
So it's kind of like IBM develops the mainframe server, gives it away, and then charges for the consulting gigs.
Exactly.
Which makes sense. Of course, it's much cheaper to do it with code than it is with hardware. So have you guys done an ICO yet? Are you basically planning on monetizing that way at all? Like where are the tokens going initially? Like how's it going to work?
So actually we are planning to do an ICO. We've done a pre-sale already.
Okay. And what's the token called?
It's called OLT.
Okay.
And so we've done a pre-sale already, so we've got a lot of interest. And so the private, the VC I was telling you about is the NEM fund. And we've been quite lucky in that we've been able to raise enough. And so we will also be launching the ICO portion geared toward the public in May.
Excellent. And, we're talking now as Bitcoin sits somewhere around, I didn't even check it out recently, I think 7,000-ish, down from almost 20,000 American. Yeah. You rolled your eyes. And when I hear that number, that's what I do. So, I'm curious, how much did that entire collapse? Like, was there, was there any kind of like skepticism that came your way after that? Or is that just kind of part of the community you don't pay attention to?
I did pay attention to it because even if I've been, now I'm quite familiar with the whole ups and downs of Bitcoin.
So is everybody who paid attention to a newspaper, yeah.
But like past couple of weeks haven't been easy, and there's always been this sort of sentiment in the industry that if you truly believe in the actual technology and you're not just there for the short term, then you will hold it. So the holders, right? You'll hold it because you know that the technology is going to improve lives.
Yeah.
So that's what I believe as well.
But in terms of the people, I think I get what you're saying. Like the people who were looking at it from the greedy, quick aspects now are skeptical and ticked off, when really that was never the point, right?
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
never to get rich quick. And I've always often said, and I said on this podcast, I love blockchain, but part of me hates Bitcoin because it's just this. That was such a Bitcoin at 20 grand was a distraction. It was a distraction from the fact that we're looking at TCP/IP as origination point. Right? We're looking at the future of the internet and every transaction at its origination point, and everybody jumping in trying to make a quick buck because it went from God knows what to 20,000 was a distraction. And I often, when it started correcting, my hope was that that doesn't limit companies such as yourself to suffer for the lack of attention or just get a black eye from it all. Right. So you haven't felt in terms of like public interaction, have you felt any kind of black eye from this?
So I have to say that our target market is always not the people who don't believe in the whole technology, but people who already believe in it. So
you're basically appealing to the technologists, not the currency chasers.
Exactly. Yeah. So we haven't felt that actually at all because we've had a very successful pre-sale. And actually, we've had to say no to some people because we felt that they just didn't fit into our long-term strategy. So not really. I mean... So
you said no to people on the pre-sale to other tokens?
Yeah, because they just didn't meet our long-term strategic goals.
So are you targeting people with B2B plays? Is that what it is?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so
B2B and also people who can help us monetize the platform after the ICO, because it's not just about it's
not about the quick buck, it's about the long term. So you're using the initial token sale or initial tokens as a way of bringing people into your network of supporters that will eventually push the
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. So, and in terms of funding this thing, I mean, you already mentioned some venture cap. I take it that raising money on a good idea in blockchain these days is probably not a hard thing to do. So can you speak to that experience? You mentioned a couple of venture cap firms.
NEM Fund.
Yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, so those firms, they have experts in their teams. And by no means, they don't just see an idea and say, okay, the idea is great, so let us invest in it. They review each proposition very carefully. The team behind the idea, the actual technology, can it be implemented? And is there when looking at the history of especially the founder, is there anything that we need to worry about? And so NEM Fund has talked to us many, many times. So it's only after going through an extensive due diligence process that they invested in one.
Yeah, I would think the fact that you're attracting, top flight VCs is a huge blessing. I mean, I heard a stat earlier this year about 50% of all the ICOs that came out last year already broke.
Right.
Because I mean, when there's a gold rush, you got every Yahoo looking to do it, and unfortunately, everybody who's basically doing something good doesn't necessarily get the right attention. So, what kind of challenges have you guys encountered thus far, other than the traditional scaling up the team and money? Like, has this been a smooth process, or have you been blessed by a smooth process, or what have you encountered?
The challenge is actually the challenge of all companies right now in blockchain is the lack of talent. So everybody is looking for blockchain developers. There are none.
And they're all in their 20s? No.
Exactly. And blockchain developers are extremely picky.
Yeah.
So that is really the challenge.
Because we all... They're the pretty girl at the dance right now.
Exactly. So we have to fight to get the best ones. And
Yeah. So, I mean, with that is, that's something I haven't thought about. I mean, you're right. There's very little infrastructure for educating these people formally. What does it cost to hire a decent blockchain engineer? Or are you free to speak about that?
So I'm just going to talk, generally speaking, for a really junior developer, you can actually spend, with just a couple of months of knowledge on blockchain, you can spend $80K to begin with. that is just a couple of months.
There you go, listeners. Your kids who are sitting around playing video games, get them learning blockchain.
Exactly.
$80,000 to start. My goodness.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I can't even imagine what these senior people must be getting. Well,
but
how many senior people can there be at this stage? Right?
But on the topic of education, so that's where Blockchain Hub comes in.
Yes, let's go to that, please. Yeah. So Blockchain Hub at York University. Tell me about what that's all about.
So a Blockchain Hub is a nonprofit organization affiliated with York University, and it does primarily education and then research and commercialization of blockchain startups, right? So the way I came into contact with OneLedger is because OneLedger had applied for the incubator program of the Blockchain Hub. And then later on, asked me to join the firm. So OneLedger is not in the incubator program right now, so there is no conflict of interest here. But that's how I came in contact with OneLedger. So on the educational side, Blockchain Hub provides a plethora of very adapted courses to the current needs of the industry. One of them, which I took myself, is the Certified Ethereum Developer course. But we also offer a Hyperledger course, which is one of the blockchain of choice from big enterprises, because it's one of those that was actually established by IBM to cater to the need of enterprise data to sometime be a private. Right? Because usually blockchain is supposed to be public, so it's out there, but not everybody wants that. So that's where Hyperledger came from. And then we just offer business professional courses as well for people who are just business focused. They do not want to learn about the development part of the blockchain, but they want to know how you build a business around blockchain. When is it appropriate? Because as popular as blockchain is right now, it's not the solution for everybody.
No.
Or for everything, right? I know usually people want that, but it is not.
Well, it's funny. There was a Dilbert cartoon where like his boss says to him, I think we need a blockchain. And he's like, thought probably like, this guy's no idea what he's talking about. And he asked the question, what color do you think the blockchain should be? He's like, I think orange is more efficient. It's like, again, like I feel like everyone's throwing blockchain at everything because it attracts attention. It attracts, like there's been stories about companies who just added blockchain to their name and suddenly their valuation goes through the roof, right? So yeah, it's a sexy word, but you're right. Like the entire concept of building a sound business, it's a gold rush. People don't think about that, but eventually that's going to come to home. So I'd be very curious to see how they teach that concept around building a business around blockchain. So out of curiosity, is that group doing like consultancy as well? Like are they advising corporations on blockchain at this point? So
the Blockchain Hub is not really in the business of consulting, but rather on the business of education, right? So that is where we are focusing on. That is what we are focusing on right now. But we do have a lot of companies that come to us and ask the same question. And so then we reply, well, what you can do is you can send us your people. We'll train them so that they know what to do, how to implement blockchain from your end, or how to resolve some of the problems that you have.
It's interesting. Have you heard about the student group at Berkeley that does consultancy?
No.
So this came out on the information back in early February, but apparently one of the most prominent consulting groups in the US right now on blockchain is actually a student group at Berkeley where they are teaching blockchain as well. But the groups just banded together a bunch of students and they're now getting paid big money by major corporations to consult on blockchain implementation. Yeah. And these guys are still in school. Like, so the demand is just, it's so infant that you literally have students getting paid tens of thousands of dollars to basically weigh in on this. And I think people at the Blockchain Hub and students that are there maybe want to think about that.
So that's the thing. So for us, our target market is not students, meaning fresh out of school students. Okay. They are usually professionals, right? Okay. So they are already coming with a certain background, a proven background, and then they are adding blockchain on top of their toolbox of skill sets, if I can say that, right? So once they have that, they can now go out to those companies who are looking for people and either work for them directly or consult for them. We've had people from Interact, from the banks, and from even the investment firm OTPP. And so they come, they learn about blockchain, and they go back and they become even better. Because we feel that blockchain is not, like I said, the solution for everything. It's just another skill set that you acquire to be more marketable. Yeah. So if you're a lawyer and you want to learn about blockchain, you take one of our courses, then you can now offer services within the blockchain industry.
So really, it's more of a professional education type approach.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, that's valuable. I mean, I think it's also wise also too, because people are able to bring what they've learned from their profession specifically into this and think about the adaptation of that technology into their space as a means to an end, as opposed to just creating a token as a means to an end in itself. So that's interesting. So what are the age ranges you're seeing come into the blockchain hub? Like what's the appeal been thus far, the backgrounds? Are these all people like in technology roles at those corporations or in leadership roles? What are you saying?
Usually, they are usually mid-level, career level and up. And we've had executives, we've had professionals with a couple of years behind them. So it's been sort of that range. But I have to say that in terms of developer, we talked earlier about the junior developer getting 80,000. But if you already have a lot of experience in technology and then you add blockchain to it, then you get paid more than a junior developer because you already have something behind you, right? So
absolutely. I mean, I think to myself, I got a friend who has built various companies from scratch. And I think to myself, well, he throws that on top of it. His salary bump will be nice as well. So question. So in terms of your involvement at the blockchain hub, what's the most exciting aspect that you see there? What excites you about your involvement there?
It's just, especially right now, it's such a small industry, actually.
It is really a cottage industry, yeah.
It's just, of course, the technology itself is quite exciting, but also you meet so many people that you don't get to meet if it wasn't for blockchain, and they are usually also people who are very prominent, right? So it's just been a very exciting place to be, and then everybody communicates to you the same excitement that you have, and then you also get to learn from them, from their experiences. So it's been just amazing.
This is frontier territory. I mean, like you guys are the explorers of the future, right? I mean, that's. It's one of these rare moments in history where we can actually see a technology it's going to make a monumental shift and be at the beginning of that.
Right.
So that's fantastic. So I'm going to ask you the exact same question about what excites you, but this time it's going to go back to One Ledger. Okay. What excites you about what you're doing at One Ledger, and what do you think about the future there?
So being able to resolve this is undeniably a real problem for the industry, this interoperability issue. And so being able to participate in that from my position, not as a tech person, but more of on the public relations side of things, is just very exciting. And I'm also learning a lot about what it takes to, how do you actually market a company, a blockchain company, right? Because it's different. I was
going to say that's another question after that. So go ahead.
Yes. So it's completely different. It's not always about the big commercial stunts. It's not always about the big ads, but it's more about how you reach out to the actual community that will support your platform. What type of social media do you use? So, for example, in the blockchain industry, Telegram is one of the number one media that companies use to reach out to the appropriate community members, but also measure the success of their marketing efforts. So it's about the numbers, right? So if you have a platform of 10,000, 50,000 members, that tells you a lot about your progress in terms of marketing. But in the traditional business side of things, it's a bit different, right? So, yeah.
Interesting. So, I mean, when you're talking, you're marketing, you're not marketing the general public, you're marketing essentially to other technologists or other people interested in crypto. I mean, I can imagine you're probably all over Reddit as well. And then also to major corporations. So it's, it's exciting times with this stuff. So that was a lot, quite frankly, for blockchain, because it's just, what's interesting with these conversations is that some of these companies go really long in the conversation about basic stuff, but you're such a fledgling point. The fact that we got this much interesting data is astonishing, and it speaks to just the important thing that you guys are doing, because I never even thought about it until you mentioned it. These things talk to each other. So thank you very much for coming in. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So that was my interview with Othalia Doe-Bruce. I hope you enjoyed that. It is new frontier territory, very exciting. And as I said, parents, get your kids coding in blockchain, because my goodness, $80,000 to start for a junior, not bad. Thank you again for joining me. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever it is you get your podcasts. And of course, email communication is very much appreciated. And feel free to reach out to us on any of the various social media links we use. And with that, thank you again, and until next time.
This podcast was brought to you by Woodgate Financial, an award-winning financial planning firm catering to high net worth individuals and their families. To learn more, go to woodgate.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play, or find more episodes at fintechimpact.co.